Hello, my name is Steve Dubin, and I am the host of My Generation, the podcast brought to you by South Shore Senior News. South Shore Senior News serves the senior community and the sandwich generation who help them. And we try to bring you useful information, interesting guests on a regular basis. Today we have an interesting guest. Mike Dwyer is a colleague and a friend of mine, and also happens to be the founder of Emplana Career, an organization that helps, among others, seniors find additional meaning in their next step and or a way to segue to a different kind of job or position that might be more gratifying as among their final chapters or their next chapter anyway. And Mike has worked in corporate America on all sides of the desk. He's worked for large companies and small companies. He's remained very technically savvy, as well as helping people with soft skills as well, of utilizing all of their talents to find the next um, gratifying position for them to take. And with that, Mike, I always allow guests a rebuttal to my attempt at a introduction.
No, thank you, Steve. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you. And I'm so pleased that you and I have done a couple of professional networking seminars together. It's given a chance to develop some comfort level and develop some of the thoughts and thinking that support this call. Thank you.
Great. Well, my pleasure, Mike. It's good to have you on. So I know that one of your focus is helping seniors um, both define and then achieve their next position, and or it could even be a nonprofit pro bono position. Let's talk a little bit about that. Where do you start with seniors?
Well, the first thing you want to do is a bit of assessment work. Um, it's a good exercise to look through your career. I very much encourage a time box or a fixed time to this. Give yourself an hour, a day, whatever makes sense, um, and look through what you're looking for are contacts or roles or activities that remind you of something that you were good at, that got the blood, got the juices flowing, that sort of thing. And I think there's two dynamics to the activity. First is looking back and seeing who you've been. And the second one is looking at what's needed out there. I mean, by looking at job boards, gig platforms, and ideally, you're finding some sort of a match between what you'd like to put forward and what the world wants.
Okay, and let me take a step back. Um, you have gone through a lot of iterations yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and how it applies to where you are today, and how you utilize all of that background to help seniors with their next step.
Well, thank you for that opportunity. Steve, I think you have another wonderful colleague that you introduced me to. And one time we were kind of feeling each other out on something, and she offered, you know what? We know different stuff. I mean, after a long career, and I think for me, I'm comfortable operating as a line professional, as a middle manager, or as an executive. And each of those things call on different responses and behaviors. And I think it's been very useful to me. And I have a full time consulting company that I've run for 15 years now, in public pension. And boy, I'm telling you, lots of gear shifting every day, at what the role is, whether you're helping with a spreadsheet, whether you're helping frame issues and set direction. And so hopefully the background I'm describing and the things I've done inform what it is I'm looking to share with people and collaborate with them as they do something very similar.
Okay. And just to be clear, you live in Hingham, you have an office in Boston, you're highly accessible. both either in person or via Zoom or other virtual platforms to people who are in the greater Boston area.
Thank you. That's exactly true.
Okay. So let me go on to ask, sort of what are some general tips on interviewing or reporting to a much younger boss, a steering committee, a board? What are some of your thoughts there?
It can trip us up, especially, and I did mention a minute ago about sort of being conscious of whether you're operating at a line professional, middle manager, or executive level. I think one of the things that can happen to seniors is they may have had very commanding positions, executive roles in the past, and they might be very pleased just to be a business analyst at something really interesting that's important, where they have a vibrant role. Um, so I think you have to ignore the fact that you might be dealing with younger people. And if it helps, I have a technique. Don't look at them, listen to them. And another thing to assume is I wouldn't do a credentials check. In other words, if you're dealing with somebody, assume that they have the requisite advanced degree. I saw somebody in a situation at City Hall, Boston recently ask a young person, but an incredibly capable person, do you have a Master of Public Policy or a Master in Public Administration? And the person said, both. Um, right, don't go checking credentials. Don't worry about how young they might look. Listen to what's being said and organize your thinking to respond in a helpful and collaborative way.
Yeah, I think ageism can rub both ways, right? I think that guys of a certain age like us, everyone looks like they're 12 years old to us, including our doctors. And sometimes we assign them lower status with that kind of um, blindsidedness. And if we, I think you make a very good suggestion. If I listen to the pearls of wisdom that they are speaking, as opposed to worrying about whether they're able to shave yet, I think I'd be more comfortable in the knowledge that I'm gaining from them. Um, so let me jump into that. Sort of leads to, the workplace is a different environment than it was. When I jumped into the workplace 45 years ago, what are some of the things that we should um, be aware of as we're looking at, the new culture of the office that we're walking into?
Um, I, well, yeah, I think that's a spot on place to start, Steve. And as you look at a culture, you know, think to yourself, this is where you can draw on your past experience. Um, you know, I'm thinking about let's touch on a few sort of checklist type things. If you're in a new environment, how do people react? How do they think about initiative, about collaboration, about spend money? Now, let's go to initiative. In some places, you might get kind of a stay in your lane vibe. And in another place, you might get sort of I had to tell you to help the person next to you. Um, and you're really looking for clues. And even as early as an interview, you want to start feeling out, do you value independence of action and kind of autonomous behavior? Do you make time and expect collaboration and lots of colleague checking? You want to get that stuff straight. And in a moment, I also want to talk about the composition of the workforce. But anything from you, Stephen, your experience on that kind of read the culture?
Well, I think that culture is always different from business to business, and has been since I joined the workplace. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there are places where oftentimes you're encouraged to provide input that might be innovative, bold, outside of your specific job definition, that could contribute to the greater good, as opposed to there are other workplaces where people are very threatened by people who are advising beyond their immediate focus, and they're sometimes threatened by people who are highly productive. Um, and they're pushing the pace too fast. And so some of that is just not new, but it's certainly part of the environment that you have to deal with, regardless of what age you are as you enter the office space.
That makes so much sense. And that lets me segue into the idea of a workforce composition mindset too, because um, most of us looking backward were part of corporations, agencies, whatever it might be, and everyone was a full time employee and maybe had a few part timers or interns. Today, you can find people that you can, things, major parts of the work could be outsourced. You might find yourself dealing with a big, an Accenture or some little, you know, micro brewery, so to speak, of a business. You might find the person next to you is was hired on Upwork or Fiverr, or is in some other contract formulation. And it's not so much that there's right and wrong associated with those things. It's just that you want to read the room, because if everyone is not a full-time employee, starting to talk about how much vacation you have could be inappropriate.
Understood. And so, that sort of leads to what kind of surprises might we bump into in the workplace that obviously are unexpected?
I think one of the things that can happen is that may have changed, and especially if someone's been away for a while, or in a kind of a more fixed environment. One of the things that I would point to is to watch out for is to understand the pace of work. Um, I saw in an article, I'm always reading things about, emerging organizational structures, way to work styles, all this. I saw something that said my manager, if my manager doesn't see activity on Slack within 8 to 10 minutes, I get a tap on the shoulder. That could feel pretty off-putting unless you were geared up about what you were doing, and it was either making money or helping the cause, and you'd be indifferent to whether someone was watching your activity. You also mentioned before that some people can be threatened by someone who's real heads down productive. So once again, it's about, I think, reading the room. Another thing too that is changed for some people, that may be a surprise, is just how much workflow, whether it's Microsoft Teams, Google Suite, Slack, whatever it is, an awful lot of work gets assigned, managed, and reviewed through electronic or digital platforms. And for seniors who aren't up to speed, cheat before you get there. One of the things you and I have done some chatting about networking and done our seminars. One of the things you can do that's fun is find a buddy, neighbor, colleague, whatever, and organize a golf tournament using Slack. Don't care what you do, just try some of this stuff that lets you get a sense. Okay, I see what happened. I see what's going on here. So you enter with some, with a level of kind of confidence and comfort.
And so essentially what you're saying is you need to dabble with whatever technology platform you're going to be assigned to.
Very much so. And if you don't know which one it is, do something on any of them, because if you're at home, like I say, as you know, Steve, I've got licenses for Teams, GoToMeeting, Zoom, you know, all kinds of things. And there's always a moment's hesitation. But broadly, if you know your way around any of those collaborative environments, you're going to be pretty quick to pick up the second one.
Okay. And so the other term that is often heard in the workplace is, the gig economy, gig platforms. Talk a little bit about that and how it impacts today's workforce.
One of the things in the emerging front, I mean, things never sit still for us. And, most of the people who are going to be listening here have been around the block enough to watch business cycles happen. Everyone's familiar with the centralization, decentralization pendulum. How many times have we seen that swing, right? That everybody's going to have the same accounting system in the whole enterprise. And then 10 years later says, wait a minute, it turns out that's a really bad idea. One of our businesses is a brewery and one of them makes golf clubs. This is not a good idea. Well, I think similarly here too, um, you're going to see that some of the ways of organizing work have strayed from classic job descriptions. In fact, there's a really good example floating around the business press somewhere where, Steve, I know you're familiar with the term voiceover, where, when you do a shoot of some kind of video, somebody has a voice that explains what's going on, a narrator or whatever. One of the things that you see in this new world is an example where Bob the accountant turns out is a wonderful at voiceovers and he knows our business. But the point of the anecdote is that most organizations aren't set up to detect that unless they're beginning to change and morph into something that's a little more free form. It's not just saying, well, wait a minute, Bob's an accountant. I have to outsource getting a voiceover. So this concept of skills based. I'm looking at a list of books right now. It happens to be, I just printed out skills based organizations, an internal gig board that says who could help with this. Those are things that might be novel for seniors or the returnee to the workforce, but done right, I think they're incredible opportunities.
Okay, and then you and I discussed earlier this week, actually, a friend and colleague of mine who was downsized in his mid 50s, um, because of a shift in the market. He was selling to primarily higher education that has seen some decline, and so there were some cutbacks, and now he's looking to reinvent himself. And you were kind enough to spend some time with him to give him some direction. But one of the things that you really emphasized was that with the bots and the electrical processing of resumes, um, many folks never get a fair shake at even the initial interview. And so you talked about um, networking and having personal connections and creating personal connections is critical, maybe more so than ever. And can you talk a little bit about how people find, in addition to their own personal network, right, of reaching out to their family and friends, that they can share the fact that they might be looking for a new opportunity? How do they create new connections that are maybe closer to the environment they want to work in?
Well, the single word is intentionally. And one of the things I'd ask everybody to think about is how's your skills, how's your network? And it turns out if you play your cards right, you can do reinforcing and supportive activities in both. Um, if you have a chance to take a class online in LinkedIn in which you talk to no one, or go to the something at the local library where you meet with people, try and get some of the latter in too. In other words, I call it topical networking, where I'm sharpening up a skill, I'm investigating something I'm curious about, um, and that's a great entree because you really don't need much small talk. You don't need that classic sales persona or the extrovert persona if you have a purpose like that. So I think I think everybody benefits from some combination of networking and skills development. And what I want to really put in people's thinking is that there are ways of doing both at once, and that's a kind of a fun way to approach it. What do I need? Where do I get it? And then look at that. I have some new contacts.
And in addition to that, you're talking about some traditional networking as well, of finding those niche trade or professional organizations that might be having open networking sessions or speakers, or other events where you might be able to infiltrate and get to know somebody, and potentially have them open the door for you.
it's great stuff, Steve. And you and I are firm believers, and as we had talked about earlier, we've shared some seminar work together. Yeah, I very much think that you what you want to do is do something within your comfort zone, and if that comfort zone might be the Rotary Club, or the local Chamber of Commerce, or it might be that you're a nerd and your comfort zone is going to a data analytics meetup. But what I'd observe is important to do is to do something outside your comfort zone. So when the technical person forces themselves to go to a business meeting, or the business meeting goes to a tech meetup, that's when some really interesting stuff starts to happen, because you bring all this experience and know-how, and just the mantra I try and tell people is let your curiosity outweigh your shyness. Just say, I have something I want to know more about. My motives are pure, and I think most people are flattered if you're genuinely interested in their topic.
Yeah, and I also know that in a networking environment, most people are both cordial, welcoming, and they literally want to save the person who appears to be the wallflower, who needs some help, getting introduced and finding a comfort level. And so when you talk about intentionality in that area, um, given that thought, how often do you suggest someone build in, a networking kind of task or event?
I would often, but it's exactly like the we all have friends who join a health club or a gym on New Year's. And unfortunately, by February, many of us are either injured or no longer attending. So if you start off by, with grandiose hopes, one of the things I try and tell people is if you did something once or twice a month, that would be 10 or 15 per year. Can you imagine how different a person would be who made themselves go to a half dozen things that they're kind of comfortable with? I'm in accounting and this is a local AI CPA group or whatever the heck it is. Or conversely, something that's new to me, a political event. Um, like my state rep does briefings. Turns out the first time I went, I was a little bit unsure how I was going to play. I love them. It's a chance to talk and hear what's going on. So, really, that's a very personal decision, but it's got to be more than zero. And it don't promise yourself some, massive change of life that says 3 nights a week I'm going to be out there, because that's unsustainable.
Yeah.
And do remember, I would offer your listeners that as something as little as once or twice a month, at the end of a year, at the end of 2 years, at the end of 3 years, you're a new person.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And so, and sort of tying up loose ends and summarizing, what's the top focus for folks who are looking to do something different?
Well, I would say networking and skills are always, but the reason you don't want to just have that be a cookie cutter, one size fits all answer is that we talked before about doing a bit of an inventory, kind of a time box or a fixed thing that lets me explore who's in my contact list. Let me, what projects have I done? And you're going to find things in there. Oh, that's right too. I used to organize events, whatever it is. Um, I think if you're somebody who is fortunate enough to have a very tidy sense of what you want to offer that kind of matches what you see in job boards or gig platforms, great. But if you're not, you're going to have to do something besides that networking and skills building. You're going to have to do some research. You're going to have to be thinking about, well, how could I combine skills? Or, there's a term I hear all the time in the business press called skills adjacency, um, where, okay, if I know this and I acquired this thing next to it, does that make me more of a player? So, broadly, I think we always want to see some networking and skills development. And I think you can combine those two. But kind of a situational ethic also suggests that you got to take stock of where you are and whether you feel like you have something that's going to be immediately, an offering of some kind, a job, a role, whatever it is, or whether you need to do some work first. to discover how to build that for yourself.
Right. Well, this has been interesting, eye-opening, a good start to the conversation about how do you transition to the next opportunity. How do people reach you to continue the conversation and explore further?
Well, thank you, Steve. I mean, the website is emplanacareer.com. And there's a form to submit there and emails and the like. And that's probably the best thing because I don't know, like many of us now, I no longer answer my phone because unless I know the person, unfortunately, right? We're all just getting ganged up on. So emplanacareer.com. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone. I'm always looking for business, but the good news is I have a full-time day job consultancy, couple of interns, you know, my main day job and activity in consultancy really gives me the wherewithal to know what's going on in the business world. So there's no arm twisting, there's no high pressure sales or anything.
Great.
Just fun.
Yeah, good for you. Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure. And footnote to our audience, and plan a career is at the bottom of Mike's video box. So if you need the spelling of that, it appears right next to his name. And Mike, again, thank you for being our guest. I look forward to working with you in the future regarding helping our community find the next gem. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. I'm so glad you're doing this. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Mike. Thank you.
Bye bye.